Wisp Sports Radio, the voice of women in sport.
Hello, and thank you for downloading this episode of Sport in Focus here on Wisp Sports. This is Season 2, Episode 2, and I'm Chris Stafford. On this episode, our sport in focus is golf, and joining me to explain the subtleties of the sport is South Asian professional golfer who is three-time All-American and All-Region West player in Division 3 of the NCAA, Maya Reddy. Maya turned pro in 2015 and played consistently on the mini tours plus the LPGA Monday qualifiers, and she also gained some status to the Symetra tour. Sadly, Maya ultimately stopped playing in events because of the mental and emotional toll that the exclusive nature of the sport took on her. But she is eager to return to the sport that she loves. Her favorite golf courses are Torrey Pines South Course in California, near where she lives in San Diego, the Talking Rock Golf Course in Prescott, Arizona, and the Golconda Golf Club in Hyderabad, India. Maya is founder of the Gaysian Project and an ambassador for Athlete Ally. She is also an incoming JD candidate at the University of Pennsylvania Law School. Maya is passionate about the intersectional queer inclusion, especially in sports, and is pursuing a legal education in order to strengthen her work in inclusive policy initiatives. Maya, welcome to the program.
Hi, I'm so excited about this.
You're based in South California, which I would imagine has a pretty consistent climate for golfing.
Yes, except for today. Today it's a bit rainy outside, but yeah, San Diego, I mean, you can't beat it in terms of golf in California. I mean, we have Torrey Pines, among many other golf courses, but we have Torrey Pines, which is like world-renowned golf course. And the really cool thing about being a San Diego resident is that since Torrey Pines is actually a public golf course, if you register for a resident card in San Diego, you can go play Torrey Pines for like $80 versus the general rate, which is $200 to $300 per round. So yeah, I honestly cannot complain about being in San Diego and golfing down here.
You mentioned the cost there, Maya, and I'm sure there are listeners thinking that golf looks a fun thing to do, but can I afford to do it? So break down the cost for us, Maya, in terms of, subscriptions, equipment, club fees, and so on.
Yeah, so golf, one second. Golf is it's one of the country club sports. And I think along with that comes the perception, which I think is a reality, that it is a very, very expensive sport and one that is exclusive with regards to those who have money and, mostly men and the people who have that money. I think now there has been over the past, decade, I want to say, a push to increase accessibility to golf. But that being said, it's still a really expensive sport, and there still isn't as much outreach to younger generations in a more diverse way than, say, a sport like soccer. And I think that is due in two things. One, unlike soccer, golf, you need a ton of equipment. So you need your shoes and you need 14 golf clubs and then a bag to put your clubs in. And then you need your tees, you need your golf balls. It's just a whole bunch of things that you need to just even go out and start playing golf. And all of those individual parts are really, really expensive. So trying to create programs that, increase accessibility to the sport is really difficult because those programs need the funding to be able to provide equipment for kids or potential golfers that don't have that equipment or are unable to, buy it themselves. So, they could possibly go to this program and be able to play with the clubs that they have there. And it's really, really unfortunate. Like, there is a very clear barrier to entry to the sport when it comes to money, because, you know, I mentioned all of the equipment that you need. Then on top of that, you have to factor in the green fees to actually go step out on a golf course. Like, Torrey Pines is one of the more extreme examples in terms of public courses, primarily because it's so well known and it's such an incredible golf course. But even then, if you go to kind of your basic public golf course, it's still like $30, $30 to $50 to go play a round of golf. And then if you want to rent, you know, a cart to drive around, that's, you know, another $30 to $40. And even if you want to just go hit some balls at a driving range, it's $10 to $15 for a bucket of balls. It's a really, really expensive sport. And, you know, among all of the issues that inclusivity in golf kind of covers, I think the biggest thing is that it is a very, very expensive sport that prevents many demographics of people from getting into the sport because of that expense and not being able to afford it, and kind of just being like, well, you know, I want to play a sport. Yeah, I'd love to play golf, but it's so expensive. But hey, soccer isn't as expensive. I'm going to go play that. So yeah.
How did you get started then? How old were you, and how did you get access to the sport?
So I am very fortunate in that, you know, my family, I have a lot of socioeconomic privilege. So growing up, my parents kind of threw me into a ton of different sports, and kind of that, like, go play all of the sports and like figure out which one you actually like when you're about to go to high school. But the reason why I chose golf and started playing that amongst everything else was because I would see my dad go and play with his friends, and I would always want to just like go hit balls at the driving range with him. So that kind of started it. I was about 3 years old, and I was like, no, I want to go play with my dad. And then kind of from there, the rest is history. It was like this really fun activity that my dad could be really involved with me. And then a couple years into it, my dad's a doctor, and he hurt his wrist. I'm not remembering exactly what the injury was, but he hurt his wrist and was unable to play golf after that for risk of, you know, affecting his career as a doctor. And kind of, I think that was something that made him even more invested in my career in playing golf, because he was able to kind of still really be involved with the sport, even though he wasn't able to play. So that kind of was what allowed me to get into golf. But I'm very aware that, you know, that is also by virtue of the fact that, you know, I'm very, very lucky to have, you know, my parents were super, super hardworking, and, you know, they built a life for themselves and for me, to the point where we could afford to, you know, be members at a country club, and for me to play golf amongst all these other sports.
So what was the appeal then, Maya, when you had so many sports to choose from then? And obviously, you know, an advantage to access the golf, but there must have been something that really challenged you and made you driven and motivated to take on golf and hit that dead ball.
It's not as, it's a very silly reason, actually. When I was kind of like ending middle school, so about to go into high school, and at that stage where I really needed to choose a sport in order to, you know, like be more exciting to colleges once I started applying, I was choosing between 3 sports. It was golf, swimming, and tennis. And out of those 3 sports, I was the best at swimming and tennis. But the reason why I didn't choose swimming was because I didn't like my coaches. They were a bit too intense for me, and I was like just too young to deal with that intensity. So I was like, nope, I'm done with swimming. And then tennis, I loved playing tennis, but I hated running. So tennis was out and I chose golf. It literally because I didn't want to run.
That's an interesting journey and a process of elimination, Maya. That's fantastic. So
yeah.
You've obviously found the sport that you enjoyed, but at what point did you decide, well, I want to be pro at this? This is what I want to do as a career.
It was a long and weird journey, but when I got to college was where I really fell in love with the sport. I was playing, on all of the junior tours, the AJGA and all of that in high school, but it was a grind. And I didn't really, I had a ton of fun playing the sport and I was very, very competitive, but I didn't really love the sport. And when I got to college, I had some incredible teammates and a really, really wonderful coach my first 2 years that really created this environment where I fell in love with the sport. And it was like when it clicked, that's when my game started getting so much better. And it kind of, in combination with my uber competitiveness, now I was seeing my skill get like increasingly better every single day. I was like, wait, I want to see how far I can take this. And due to some unfortunate circumstances, my senior year of college, I wasn't able to meet the goals that I had set out for myself and was like really close to reaching in my final season of collegiate golf. And that also really, really lit that fire underneath me that was like, I don't feel like I'm finished yet. Like, I want to see how far I can take this for myself. And I don't want to regret never chasing this dream. But it never really was like a lifelong dream of mine to play sports, golf competitively. It was more like, wait, like I got really, really good. I really love this sport. I want to see how far I can go with it. And that's kind of what led me to playing professionally.
What did you find were your actual talents for the sport, and what were skills that you had to work at?
I hit the ball really, really far, which is my one thing. I don't know what to do when I get around the green. It is hilarious. Like if you see any of my stat sheets, it'll be like, all right, hits the fairways, like really great fairway percentage, really good green and regulation percentage. But those holes where like I don't hit the green in regulation, it's like a total mess on the scorecard. And I always joke with my friends, it's like almost like I have an out of body experience where I just forget how to play the game when I get around the green. So that's been kind of the biggest thing that I've always had to work on is really dialing in my short game. Because when you look at any professional golfer out there that's really winning, Tiger is a really easy and great example. Where he won the Masters was around his finesse on the green. And if you're able to really make up for a bad approach shot that didn't hit the green, or, save yourself from a bunker, or even something as simple as just making consistent putts, 1 putt, 2 putts, not even getting even close to 3 putts, that's where you win like all of your tournaments and you hit those low scores. And for me, the chipping and putting and all of that short game has always been like the hardest for me. So I've had to spend a lot of time on all of that.
Explain what the green and regulation part is.
So par in golf is the amount of strokes that you should, finish the hole in. So if you're a par 4, it should take you 4 shots in order to get the ball into the hole. On those holes, you also, when players are keeping stats of how they're playing, will mark fairways in regulation, greens in regulation, and then the number of putts that it took us to finish out a hole. So a fairway in regulation means that you hit the fairway on your drive. You just launched a great drive into the middle of the fairway, and you have a great approach shot to the green. A green in regulation is when you hit the green from that approach shot. So on a par 4, your second shot should hit the green. on a par 5, it would be your third shot would hit the green. And then on a par 3, your tee shot would hit the green.
Okay.
So it's basically just like getting it in that area.
Right. So now looking, I mean, you're obviously very realistic about your strengths and weaknesses. If you were to address somebody who has never played before and they really wanted to make a go of this, what would you say would be the basic skills that you require? You might learn to hit the ball harder, for example, and be more accurate with the short game. But what would you say are the basic skills for golfing to enjoy it and be successful at it?
Yeah, so I would say that, the important thing about golf is realizing that, yes, it is a chase of perfection, but you're never going to hit a perfect shot every single time. Like the best thing that you can really try to ingrain in yourself is that it doesn't matter if your drive looks gorgeous. Like, is it in the middle of the fairway and can you play it? Your drives aren't going to look perfect every single time. Your iron shots aren't going to look perfect every time. And that's okay. Like, you're trying to get it in the hole. And however you do that is great. There's so many different swing types out there on tour right now that look from, beautifully gorgeous, like a Tiger Woods or a Rory McIlroy, to a bit strange and a little bit out there. And yet at the end of the day, they all work. And kind of along with that, I would also say that when you're working on your swing and when you're really trying to fine tune your game, don't look for what is the perfect swing. Look for what is the perfect swing for you. This took me actually till this year to find a coach who really wanted to work with the swing that I have versus trying to fit it on a mold of what supposedly is a perfect swing. And that has made the biggest difference. So for example, for myself, I play with a closed club face, and then I have a very strong grip, and I tend to kind of jump through the ball similar to Lexi Thompson or Justin Thomas. And I had been told throughout my entire career that one, I need to not jump through the ball, so I need to keep my right leg down longer. I need to square up my club face, so I need to not play with one that's so close. And I need to weaken my grip. So these are all three things that I was always told that I need to focus on and make sure that I was improving. And in that, it created a really, really tense swing. Like, I was just very tense. I was thinking about so many things at the same time. And it was when I found, a couple coaches recently that were like, no, like, your swing works. Like, it works for you. This is your swing. It's like your fingerprint. How do we kind of get this swing to be more consistent and eliminate your bad errors? Let's work with that instead of trying to make your swing like Tiger's or like Rory's. And I think that that's the most important thing to focus on, to just be like, okay, you have your swing. How do we improve your game in the most simple way possible without adding all of these technical elements on it and without trying to superimpose your swing onto somebody else's who may have different body mechanics and, like a whole line of differences that would, prevent you from replicating their swing. I think when you simplify everything and you work with what you have, that in itself will translate to a more fun time on the golf course, and lessen the frustration you'll have. And then at that point, hopefully the only things that you'll be frustrated with is like a really bad crosswind or a bad bounce on the fairway.
Yeah, exactly. Nature will take its own course anyway and challenge you, right? Now, that's interesting, and I think it's a very valid point, isn't it? And it applies to so many sports that we shouldn't interfere too much with what you're naturally gifted is and what your natural physical capabilities are as well. So this would lead me to asking you then about physical preparation and for playing a round of golf, because it can look fairly low energy golf. I mean, and really, you could be walking or you could be riding in a golf cart. So not going to take a lot out. I'm not going to burn a lot of carbs here. But you have to have a mental game, right? You have to have that stamina in so many other ways. So let's talk about how you would physically prepare, get fit enough to play golf consistently. Do you cross-train?
Yes, I do. And I think my obsession with cross-training and staying in shape came from two sources. One from Tiger, because he was kind of the first golfer that was like, hey, we should be in shape to play this game at the best of our abilities. And then two, my cousins, who are kind of like my older brothers, they were really fit and worked out a lot. And seeing that, I was like, oh, I want to be like that, which had this really, really great benefit. And I think that for anyone playing golf, staying in shape is really, really important. And increasing your cardio output is also very, very important, because even though playing a round of golf seems really low energy, many rounds of golf are like 4 to 5 hours. 4 hours is how long a round should take, but that rarely happens. And so you're kind of out there on the course for 5 hours in the middle of the day. It's hot. Not only do you have to kind of walk this, I can't remember how long a golf course is in miles, but like you're walking many miles. So not only do you have to do that, but you also have to make sure that your mind is in check. So reducing physical fatigue really, really helps your brain like stay in shape, essentially, and stay sharp for the rest of the round. And also, like, the more in shape you are, the more you're able to use your body to its fullest abilities, and you're able to, hit a longer drive that is consistent. You're more in tune with your body, and you're not suffering from as much fatigue from walking around the course, which allows you to just play a better game of golf. So that's what helped me a lot. Like it's funny, like for me, my cross training is like the complete opposite of like what golf is, where golf is a very like a slow and a long endurance type of sport. My cross training usually involves like a lot of high energy things to really, really get kind of all of that energy out and ensure that my cardio, like my endurance and my cardio output is as best as it possibly can be. So during those really long rounds, I'm not worried about getting really physically tired on hole number 11 and worried about like, oh, how am I going to drag my feet up this next hole and then get my mind in check to hit a good shot. And yeah, so those are things that I like won't have to worry about.
Tell us about coaching then, Maya. You talked about the other expenses for taking up golf. Now, at what point do you need, to pay a coach regularly? Obviously, you need someone to teach you the game in the first place, but how often would you need to be coached? And of course, that will increase once you become professional. But give us an idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, so I think it depends on what level you're at. When you're starting out, having like a consistent coach, like once a week is always very helpful to like, really get your hands on the game and start figuring out, what your swing looks like, what your game looks like, really get in tune with like what your personality is on the golf course. And then I think like in junior golf, like when you're playing competitively in high school, having a swing coach is important. I'm not sure like how consistent like what consistency is like the best amount, like whether it be weekly or like twice a month or something like that. I do think that it's really important to recognize that for, kids that are playing competitively when they're playing on school teams, not a lot of times those coaches are swing coaches. And I think that's really, really important to know, so that you're not going into this space expecting your high school golf coach to be able to help fine tune, a slice that you may be having on the first day of a tournament. And instead you're like, okay, like this is my coach for this tournament. But if I'm having issues with my swing, like I can just text a picture to my swing coach. So that was something that was like really important to me, to know that like I don't, like figure out my expectations for the different coaches in my life. I have my swing coach and I have my team coach. But as I've gotten older, I've wanted to have less coaching, like less consistent coaching, because I have felt, through my own experiences, the more consistently that I saw a swing coach, the more technical that I became. And this might just be a personal preference of mine, but the more technical that I started to get and the more in my head I became, the more my game suffered, because I was just thinking nonstop. I was like, wait, like if only like I could change this one part of my swing, then everything will be perfect. And so I would spend like hours on the range just trying to figure out this one tiny part of my swing, when in actuality, like I would say the most beneficial way to practice golf is to go out on a golf course and actually play and actually put yourself in the different positions that you would be during a normal round of golf. Because when you're on a range just trying to fine tune one tiny part of your golf swing, like you get the same lie every single time. Like nothing's really happening. And so you're not able to adjust for the differences in lie, whether the ball be above your feet or below your feet, or like, in the rough or things like that. So I would say like finding a balance for coaching that is good for you is really important, instead of basing what is good coaching off of what everybody else is doing.
Very interesting. Yes. Let's talk about the tournament structure then, for amateurs and then professionals, and how you make that jump from being an amateur to a pro. What does that take?
So it's actually really simple, right? Like going from an amateur to a pro just means that you entered a tournament and you're going to be playing for money. So that's kind of like the basic definition of what a professional athlete in any sphere is. And it's pretty simple like that in golf as well. You're an amateur as soon as you are playing junior golf up through collegiate level golf. And so once you finish your NCAA kind of stuff, obviously this is very much like US specific, but once you finish your NCAA career, you have different options as to how to progress your golfing career. Many folks choose to continue playing as amateurs because entry fees to different tournaments are cheaper for amateurs. But then you're not, if you win that tournament, you're not winning any money. But then there are other folks like myself who was like, you know what, I'm just going to start playing professionally. And so I would start entering tournaments as a pro, and then I would be competing for money. I don't think that there really is any difference there. Amateurs are still grinding as hard as professionals are grinding to play in these tournaments. We're all, right now I'm kind of mostly referring to the mini tours, which are a bunch of professional and amateur tournaments that happen in the United States that are kind of like practice grounds for the big tournaments. So the men have mini tours and the women have mini tours. And essentially there are these just really cool event series where you're able to go and compete with other players that you would be competing with at the higher level tours. So it's really, really great practice. But yeah, I've played with a ton of amateurs and there's no difference. Like our practice regimens are the same. Like we're all basically doing the same thing. The difference is that they aren't going to be competing for the money. Like they're not winning any prize money, whereas I would be winning prize money. I think that what's really, really important is to try to think about the tournaments just as another tournament, and don't think about them as like, yes, you are playing for your livelihood in many senses, but once you put that pressure of like, oh God, I'm playing this tournament and I need to win this money, then that makes things a lot harder. Like that puts extra pressure on yourself to play better. And for myself, that was detrimental to my game. Instead of being able to be like, okay, yes, I want to win this money. Let me put this over here in this box for right now and just focus on my game for, this next 4 hours. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question well.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it just gives us a whole different perspective now of what it takes to be a professional player. How long have you actually been a pro?
So I turned pro in 2015. And then I took some time off in 2017. And so I'm not just to deal with my mental health and work through that and get to a point where I would be able to play at the best of my abilities. But yeah, so I guess I'm a hiatus pro right now for 4 years, 2019. Right. I don't know what year it is. Yeah.
And are you eager to get back to it, or are you just going to let it take its course?
I want to get back to it so badly. I feel like I have so much unfinished business, and like it still is really, really difficult for me to be like, yeah, like I'm not really playing right now, or I haven't, gotten my LPGA tour card yet. And those are things that are just still really, really difficult for me to say and like recognize. But at the same time, I also know that for me to play at the best of my abilities, I need to be in the right stage of my life, like mentally. Because if my mental game, and I've known this throughout my entire career, it's like those days when your mental game isn't there, it is so hard to play well. Like it is grueling out there on the golf course. And I don't want that to, be something that is, preventing me from being the best. And so if I can take some time off and really work on myself and get to a point where, yeah, like I feel really good, I feel like I can go out there and really play, then that's what I want to do.
So just for clarification then, you can be a pro player without playing on the LGP, sorry, on the tour. Thank you. On the tour itself. Now, so being on the tour is just a personal choice, or do you have to qualify in some way?
You have to qualify. So yes, you can be a professional golfer without having your LPGA tour card. If you're playing for money on the mini tours or on the Symetra tour, which is the developmental tour for the LPGA. But the end goal of every professional golfer on the women's circuit is to get their LPGA tour card. So what that means is you have qualified for exemptions into every single LPGA tour event. And in order to get that card, it's a very long process, but one that is very egalitarian, I want to say. Like there is no, so unlike the NFL or basketball, like you don't have to get drafted into it. You don't have to have have gone to like a Division I college and played there in order to get a leg up for this qualification process. Literally anyone can sign up for the LPGA Q school, which is qualifying school, and try their hand at competing to get their LPGA tour card. And I think that's something that's really cool. Of course, there are barriers to that, including the financial aspect, which we discussed earlier. But I've played with so many different folks who, some of them didn't go to college and they're out there playing. And I'm like, that's awesome. Some of them went to Division I colleges and are out there playing the same course in the same tournament as I am. I went to a Division III college and I'm still out there, with the really awesome athletes from USC or UCLA who are like incredible, Division I teams. And we still are all kind of like in the same field, working our butts off to try and get that LPGA Tour card, which is really cool. But it is a very, very long process, and it's a very hard process at that as well. But yeah, like you just have to work hard for it, essentially. But you don't have to, being a professional golfer doesn't mean that you were on the LPGA Tour, essentially.
Good. Thank you for clarifying that. But the other question I do have is, why are Asian women so good at golf?
So I have not done a lot of research in, the way in which sport is emphasized in countries like Japan or Thailand or Korea. But from what I know, one of my coaches in college played on the Korean LPGA Tour. And from listening to her experiences and just my brief knowledge of those countries, is that there are many more resources for female athletes to play sports in this way. And right now, golf is a huge industry in Japan and Korea. And so there is more incentive for folks to, to provide those resources and to have more opportunities for development for younger athletes and younger female athletes, which is something that we just don't have in the United States. Golf is a big industry, but it's not like a sexy sport, right? Like, we're not going to be spending a lot of money for female golfers and their development in the United States versus the amount of time that we're spending on soccer, which, again, it's not as much, but it is more significant than for golf. And so I think that is one of the reasons why the LPGA Tour right now is really, really dominated from foreign-born Asian players, because there is just more opportunities for them to play and to improve their game, and there's more access over there. Whereas in the United States, it's still, golf is still very, very much a man's sport. So in that sense, many people are like, okay, if it's a man's sport, then why do we need to spend money on women?
Coaching, of course, is something we all want to see more women coaches in so many sports. What does it look like in golf?
I feel like I have had a lot of female coaches. Both of my coaches in college were women on our college team. My swing coaches have largely been men, but right now I'm working with this incredible woman at Torrey Pines, who I'm like, loved my previous coaches, but low-key, I'm kind of like, okay, you are currently blowing everyone out of the water in terms of how you're coaching me. Why didn't I find you earlier? But I feel like, and even the tournaments that I played in college, like there were a decent amount of female coaches on different collegiate teams. So I'm not sure, kind of in comparison to other sports, if there is as much of a dearth in female coaches in the world of golf. I do know that there still is stigma about being women in golf. And just in speaking to my own swing coach, she still has to deal with a lot of people coming up to her and being like, oh, honey, let me show you how to hit the ball, when this woman, like, played Division I college golf, is like an incredible golfer and could knock, anyone out of the water single-handedly.
I appreciate you taking the time to explain the sport to us, Maya, and we look forward to you getting back on the golf course and following you down the fairway, so to speak, and polishing up your short game. Now we'll be watching. Now
I admitted that everyone who ever listens to this and ever plays with me is going to be like, oh, we see what you mean about your short game.
Right. Now we know. She can hit the ball down the fairway. But, all right. Well, I'm sure it will be a very welcome return to the sport. But thanks very much for taking the time to come on the show and explaining to us.
Thank you.
And we're going to do more golf coverage with you too, aren't we?
Yes. Hopefully we have to get that all figured out, so it's really awesome.
I'm looking forward to that, Maya. Well, again, thanks for taking the time to come on the show. Take care.
Thank you, Chris. Bye.
Conversations from the world of women's sports. This is Wisp Sports Radio.
So for golfing fans, stay tuned for news of more golf coverage here on Wisp Sports. In the meanwhile, check out all the other sports that we cover here at wisports.com, or, of course, on any podcast app. Just subscribe free of charge to Wisp Sports on any podcast app. And if you follow us on social media at Wisp Sports, you can join in the conversations there about women in sport, whatever your chosen sport is. And you can also contact us here directly by emailing info@wispsports.com. We always love to hear from you if you have any comments or questions or suggestions for topics or sports or guests that you think we should be including in our coverage. Until the next time, thanks for listening and, of course, supporting women in sport everywhere. Goodbye for now.